Culture change has been mentioned a number of times today, and it's clear that for CSR to be embedded in the organisation, we have to accept that there is an element of change required within the total business. And that change must come from the top, and then it must flow down and flow up and become a living, breathing entity. And the question earlier about what happens when a CEO departs an organisation, and the answer was brilliant, that there should not be change because the culture should be much greater than the power of the CEO. So when it comes to change management, there is a quote that I particularly like, and it goes along the lines that people will tolerate the opinions of others, but they will only act on their own conclusions. And I'm going to argue to the CSR zealots here today, and there might be one or two, that the same goes when you're talking in your own organisations, that people will not accept the need for change, they will not accept the need for corporate social responsibility or reporting unless they reach their own conclusions that this is in the best interest of the organisation. On that theme, I would like to introduce Linda Funnell-Milner, who is one of the country's most respected CSR consultants. She is chair of the Global Reporting Initiative Stakeholder Council. She has helped a number of organisations understand corporate social responsibility and introduce it into their organisations, not least Lend Lease, Westpac, and now the National Australia Bank. So I'm going to ask Linda to come up and talk about the various pitfalls and the strategies to success when it comes to corporate social responsibility. Thank you, Linda.
Great, thanks, John. And well, that last session, that was pretty exciting. I really enjoyed that. I enjoy a debate, and there's been plenty of that today, and that's fantastic. I've heard a lot of people even still debating what is corporate social responsibility. And so I'd just like to start with a few words of it's pervasive, it's pragmatic, it is about what you do every day as an organisation and how you deliver that. So if you are a bank, a mining company, pharmaceuticals company, a media company or a not-for-profit, it looks different to the way that anybody else does it. It even looks different to your competitor. And this is why it is so complex. This is why it is so difficult. It has to go across the whole organisation. It is the lens, but it has real business outcomes. And if you don't get real business outcomes, then it's only been rose-coloured glasses. So be very careful. And sometimes in organisations, you will have to be the brave person to point out the difference between those rose-coloured glasses and what is a sustainability lens. I've said it had to be pervasive. So it actually doesn't matter how many charters you sign up to, whether you're in the Global Compact or the Equator Principles or you're heavily into greenwash or not. And it doesn't matter where you are on the indices. And I think Ray Anderson, who started the journey 11 years ago with Interface, is the perfect example of why whatever charter you make today is not the end. It is a journey and it's continuous because society's expectations always change. And I'm going to actually say, Gary, Wallman, wherever you are, I'm sorry, but I can't do the little dance, okay? And which is very funny because yesterday I was one of the judges, so if you weren't happy with the score I gave you yesterday, you know, I expect a low one today myself. Okay, I want to actually go through a few things. I actually might skip through a lot of my slides because I think you must be sick of hearing some of these things. And I might tell a story instead about, you know, various companies I've had experience with. But to me, this is the first generation of corporate social responsibility. And I know you've seen this diagram a lot, but this is the old paradigm. It has overlapping pieces in the middle, but the rest, those other blank spaces in these circles, was business as usual. So people talked about CSR being the bit in the middle, and it's not. It's everything. It was focused on internal perspective, what happened inside the company, only was interested in direct impacts. No view of the extent of influence through indirect impacts or within your supply chain, or a need to be responsible in many other indirect ways on the society. But there have been several generations, and I think now when we look at the real leaders, and in fact Ray Anderson's company Interface didn't need to win an index for us to actually be able to see that he is a leader. Every company goes through several iterations, and it will depend on how agile your organisation is, how quickly you move through each one of these generational issues. But I think it was round about the 80s and 90s, legal compliance was it. In fact, I was the first environment manager for Lend Lease Corporation in the early 90s, and it was a compliance focus, but they did understand they could turn it to a benefit. And that was in an era when to talk about environment and development, I almost had to be wearing cheesecloth and beads, because that's what they thought environment was about. Environmental degradation, mine rehabilitation really led the way in Australia, occupational health and safety in the construction industry. The late 90s to now, we have an increase in understanding, and some of that has actually been borne out by some of those very, very bad things that companies would have preferred that they didn't have to experience, such things as cash for comment for financial services industry in Australia, being found out, the issues around the social issues around branches for rural and regional Australia, and environment through indirect impacts. So it's not until you actually get to this third generation that you start to see that it is all pervasive. It is what I was saying in the beginning. Pharmaceutical companies now know that HIV/AIDS is an issue for them, so do mining companies, because it directly impacts their employment workforce. So I actually use this for a diagram of the third generation for corporate responsibility. And this is the World Bank Sustainability Diamond, and if you go to the World Bank training website, they have a great program that you can all sign up to for free that will take you through managing these issues inside your company. Now, this diagram actually says that, takes a totally multi-stakeholder approach, and a multi-stakeholder approach is not market research, it is something quite different. And it says if you get the rule of law, which is about equity, fairness and trust in a society, and your internal corporate structures and policies correct, and you're listening to your complementary CSR institutions, you actually can develop business processes and practices that are innovative and that move you ahead of your other competitors. But if you get it wrong, you will end up in regulation, competition and standards. And I just want to give you a couple of examples of that, of what that might look like for separate parts of your business. So on the customer, internal corporate structures and policies from a customer perspective, they are your products and services. They are your customer complaints, that is your customer satisfaction. The bottom one, complementary CSR institutions from the customer perspective, are your consumer associations. And if you get that relationship wrong, as the big banks in Australia have, you end up with a whole series of issues around consumer law, the banking industry ombudsman, the Reserve Bank talking about record levels of personal debt in Australia. And unless banks actually take control of that agenda by being involved in dialogue, they will end up in regulation. And we've had two great examples of that in Australia. They have the Financial Services Reform Act, which legislates the sale of deposit products because the industry could not regulate itself. It is regulated ethics. We also have on interchange fees, the Reserve Bank has regulated the way in which interchange fees will operate. So it's only when you get it wrong that you end up moving into this area of licence to operate. So while ever you can stay on the right-hand side of that diagram, you're doing okay. I could give you an example of employees as well in terms of your internal corporate structures, your engagement programs, your training and development, your performance review and your enterprise bargaining. and your unions, etc., are down in the bottom, complementary CSR institutions. And when you get it wrong, you end up in discrimination law, employment law, privacy law, occupational health and safety law, etc., etc. So you can see how the model works. It's a very pragmatic model. In actual fact today, companies have to do everything. We are now in an and society. It is not either or. So you do have to have your eye on obeying the law. As a smart business managing all of your issues, you do need to control costs, risks, liabilities, negative impacts. But you need to create new value. You need those products and services that are changing the way you look to your customers and the way that you are responding to society. You need processes, alliances, new markets, new business models that meet those customer needs and societal expectation. And you do need strategic philanthropy programs and social venture capital programs, because that is how you tie the heart of what you do every day into areas in the community that need your assistance. And business cannot operate on its own in isolation. Now, this actually isn't about embedding, but I think this is a very, very important thing for people to understand, is that in any organisation or industry, there is a reality versus perception axis. And if you're doing really, really well, you do 50% of reality. You have a program, you roll it out, you get an equivalent perception lift. And that's fantastic. But there is, obviously, in some industries, there is a negative bias line and there is a positive bias line. So I'm just going to quickly talk about that. There are some industries or even some companies that are very, very privileged in that they do a little bit of reality. They already have a lot of organisational trust and community trust. They get a huge perception lift. And in the banking industry, probably Bendigo Bank and St George Bank are on the positive bias line. And but if you're a Big Four and there is not a lot of trust in society, or a big mining company or a big pharmaceuticals company, then you have to do a lot more reality to get even a small perception lift. And that is a very raw way of you understanding where trust is in the society on you as a company or on your industry. And it's very, very important. And this is why marketing can't fix that for you. You actually have to do a lot. And it's going to take banks a while to come back into that centre line, the Big Four. The most exciting thing about CSR as a possibility is that when it's done well, when it's done the way it's done at interface, it actually releases innovation inside the organisation. Within some industries, you have so many companies who actually are operating down in this traditional socio-economic agenda. They're managing the risks. You know, they're the people who tick the compliance box. They're the people who are last movers, not first movers. And this is not the best way for them to be leaders in society, for them to make a bigger profit than their competitors. The only way to do that is actually to be working up here in the transformational socio-economic agenda. And clearly, Interface do that. They are actually working up there in that corner. The rest of the industry may be following behind. They are Me Too organisations. Notice that you go there with your partners and it creates opportunity. So it's very, very important. I'll give you a couple of examples about banking. Let me ask you a question. Which bank developed and now owns financial literacy? Great. Which bank is the first bank to move on high levels of personal credit card debt and actually change the way they assess how they'll give credit cards to individuals? Yeah. No, ANZ. They moved last week. They're the first bank to do that. Which bank actually has a small program that is helping 350 low and vulnerable income people get out of personal debt through financial planning, but also matching their savings $2 for $1. ANZ. Now note, ANZ is not number one on any of those indices. But what I'll ask you just to think about, what other bank is matching them on product and service along those lines? So this is a really, really important piece. You must move into transformational socio-economic agenda, because if you don't do that, the public will become very cynical, and as Australians, we're a great cynical lot. And there are a lot of people out there who want to believe this is greenwash. They really want to believe this is not real, this is the flavour of the month, and there are people inside your organisations who so want that to be proven so that they can go back to business as usual. This is a diagram that's actually used, and I use for boards, and that is that, think of it as the iceberg. Your financial capital is what is actually visible to your shareholders. If they're the ones who only care about how much profit you're making, then that's the financial capital that actually sits above the top line, above that waterline. But in actual fact, that is supported and generated by all of the intangibles that sit below that waterline. And so that is your organisational capital, your ability to learn and disseminate information, your human capital, your eco-value and your stakeholder capital. That's actually what is supporting that financial line. And when I actually talk about this diagram, board members get it. So, and that's great. And it's all very, very finely balanced, and we know just how finely balanced it is. I just want to take a minute to talk to you about trust, because at one of the organisations I was at, we actually did measure trust. A fair few people have measured trust and that we need to have trust. And there is actually a model, it's a Grunig's model, which comes out of the US. And it talks about trust and measures trust by looking at several things: integrity within the organisation, dependability, the competence to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, mutuality of control, that is, how do you use your power and influence? In a stakeholder relationship, if your NGOs are really screaming, that's maybe because, it usually is because, you are acting in a very unilateral way and you aren't listening. How committed are you to all your relationships? And how committed to you are in terms of delivering on expectations, and that's measuring satisfaction. And I just want you to think about some of the companies, for instance, you know, Microsoft, pharmaceutical companies, Ford, GM, Toyota. Where do you think they are on a trust indice? So it can be done, and I have done that. And it is very, very valuable information and a big wake-up call inside an organisation, because often they find they're actually allocating resources and money in completely the wrong place. They don't understand why that trust isn't building, because they're actually allocating resources in the wrong place. So brand and reputation are very, very finely balanced, and you have to build trust with customers, consumers and society. And it can be part of the functional and emotional attribute of a product or a service, but it is never going to be able to give you significant price premium. So it's not possible. So if people think they're going to CSR because suddenly they're going to make a lot of money, you know, I think we're yet to see some examples of that, probably with the exception of the Prius and Toyota, who clearly have taken a market advantage, even over Honda. I drive a Prius. Their best advertisement, actually. So marketing is based on subtle shifts in society, but this trend in CSR has actually been going for 10 years, and there are still some companies in Australia who haven't picked up on what those subtleties are. So what is actually happening? We have the rise in corporate collapse. The development of ethical policies inside organisation is the response to that. We have public concern about long-term futures. And we see people switch brands. Nike are still trying to recover, even though they have done so much to improve their supply chain. But I don't know if they'll ever actually get over their brand, the brand beating. Sometimes CSR is more powerful business to business, so it is better to be the business that other businesses want to choose, and sometimes you do get a consumer lift. But appealing to CSR values won't mask fundamental weaknesses in your product quality. So, I'm always thinking of World Business Council actually have a document free of charge on their website that is about CSR and marketing. And there is this great cartoon of this huge factory that's just spewing out pollution everywhere, and at the end is the conveyor belt that comes out with the holistic organic muffin. And, I think that says it all. Your philanthropy programs can't mask a bad company either. So make sure that you are not trying to buy credibility with your programs. You actually have to be behaving credibly. This is the social risk equation, which actually says the organisational vulnerability is directly impacted by a threat from stakeholders and issues. And that is your social risk. This is not necessarily the place where you should start from, though a lot of companies start from here. And we know so many companies who actually have started because they are in deep shock over an issue. But it is one lens, and in the end, as CSR practitioners, I think you have to start with, well, this is what I've been given, so let's go. But this is not going to release innovation inside your company. You do need to look at this because it will allow you to focus on which priorities and resource areas that will make the biggest contribution to releasing innovation inside the company, but this is still only managing risk. Enlightened self-interest companies, senior management and board of directors do believe in a more inclusive approach. They do understand that collective intelligence of a society will enhance the creation of long-term shareholder value. But they have to actually help that happen by creating an agile organisation internally. Great business ideas originate from any part in the society, not just those areas with the greatest financial proximity to that organisation. So it's going to come from anywhere. Now, this is a diagram that I lovingly refer to as spaghetti. But this is why yesterday people were talking about managing complexity, and also Martin referred to the fact is, where is the entry point for CSR? And I have to tell you, it's not clear. Organisations are not linear. They are organic. Those threats come into the organisation, or opportunities come into the organisation from any of those, customers, suppliers, employees, investors and civil society, at all different places. And this is why you need an agile organisation, so that everyone can manage it. This is why your corporate affairs department can't be the managers of CSR. Everybody on the line has to be managing this, because you actually want the guy who is developing the credit product to be able to answer the questions that he gets asked, not refer it off to the PR department. They need to understand those answers. When they understand that, they get relevance. Without relevance, they actually think it is just marketing, and you start to breed a whole series of non-believers inside your organisation, and the end point of that is death for CSR. Yesterday there was reference made to Ira Jackson and Jane Nelson's study of 360 companies and looking at what actually does drive, and I think the study is called 7 Strategies for Delivering Profits with Principles. And here are the 7, but I do recommend this book to you. Become people-centred. Engage in new alliances. Practice superior governance. Pursue purpose beyond profit. Harness innovation, spread economic opportunity, and be performance-driven at every single point. And so many people have talked about these that I don't want to spend more time on that. I recommend the book to you, and I think you've heard those messages a lot over the last 2 days. So the intangibles, yes, reputation is very, very slippery. And it is very, very hard to know exactly where that threat is going to come from within your organisation, which is why it needs to be organisation-wide. So Enron, why did Enron happen? Silo behaviour, sitting in one part of the organisation. A great book, What Really Happened Inside Enron. I'm looking forward to seeing the movie. HIH in Australia, the lack of a moral compass inside that organisation in regard to who owned that company, whose money were they actually managing. NAB, silo behaviour. It came from one part inside the organisation. There were codes of ethics, there were codes of conduct, there was everything. But one part inside your organisation can be a fatal flaw. BHP, Octeti, decentralised silo behaviour. There are some things that have to come from the corporate centre. We can have decentralisation, but that's only when everyone clearly understands, no matter what country you're in, what the values are and how to make a decision. Does your organisation ask you to make profit anyhow, regardless? As an employee, do you think your company would want you to make a decision to make a profit over an ethical decision? And most people inside your companies actually don't know that. So it's really, really important. Nike and the supply chain, James Hardie. What were they thinking? Companies that have great strategies but just can't execute because their employees don't believe the rhetoric. And so you do have to start with your employees. They're your biggest risk, they're your biggest asset, they're the ones who will release innovation inside your organisation. Things that I think are essential for leadership inside an organisation are three things: compelling vision, broad-scale commitment, and excellence in execution. And I have seen many companies that actually just cannot execute. And to execute, you have to have management systems and you've got to get down to the nitty-gritty of what you do every day. But these three things are the tools for mobilising the organisation on corporate social responsibility. They help to develop motivation, ownership and objectives as it attempts to characterise the move to competition, innovation and responses. It helps them to catch new values and insights that take root because they make sense and because they create actionable results. They help you to embed the new way of thinking in your culture. All cultures are different. In actual fact, knowledge does not transfer between companies. Knowledge will transfer inside your company. A carbon copy of another company's programs is just a me too. It will only give you a short-term benefit. You need to create the organisation to be agile, have a look at that model, use the model and look at the example, but then you need to create something inside your own organisation because your employees will not own it if it actually belongs to another brand. So you've got to do this inside your own company. There are some very basic things. This sort of says there are 4 levers inside your organisation: strategy, processes, technology and people. These things are often expressed as parts of the balanced scorecard. Through that, the sustainability pathway is you have to have an agreed vision. You need to assess and align across your organisation. You may need very specific strategies. Perhaps you've been ignoring that human rights issue. Perhaps you've been ignoring diversity. And then you need to implement. So you do need to do these things, and that is very, very systematic. And you can't avoid this. And some people want CSR to be all of the heart. And all of the heart is wonderful, but it will not get CSR embedded inside your organisation. There are 2 types of things inside your organisation. There are the adaptable enterprise systems and there are the self-organising ones. And the self-organising ones are your people. They are the ones that you will have to have the carrot or the stick. And you will have to, there will be naysayers inside your organisation and you do need a way of dealing with those. And maybe that is out the door, but I would hope that that's after a proper process. So you need to invest in their training. You need to invest in helping them to develop their values and understand why it's relevant to them. And you need systems thinking, and this is pretty basic. Now, systems thinking actually isn't ISO 14001, but ISO standards and management systems and management frameworks are good, and you do need them inside your organisation. That's how you actually get alignment. But I'll just say for the people here in the audience from Australia, Guns Limited, which as we know is a highly suspect company in Australia because they log old growth forests in Tasmania with a licence to do that. One of their main claims is we are ISO 14001 certified. So here we have the example of you're holding up a position on the one hand, behaving completely differently. It will not get credibility for your company, no matter how many ISO ticks you've got, including ISO 9000 or any of the others. Creating a performance culture. Identifying key risks and opportunities. We went through all of this morning. This was really all in the game, though I hadn't seen the game, so we seem to all be singing from the same hymn book. I want to talk a little bit about rigorous metrics and explicit public commitments to targets and incentive structures. You actually do need to have rigorous metrics, and they do need to be in the public domain. I know a lot of organisations who want to just have their own silent objectives for the first year, don't have a problem with that. But you have to ask questions about a company who never ever goes public about what their targets are. Not only that, but it sends a very, very important message to your employees. It sends a message about how important and how committed you are to those tasks, or whether or not you're still only focused on the financial bottom line. Incentive structures. You must have consequence management inside your organisation. If you aren't improving diversity and nobody is accountable for it, then it's never going to get any better. Somebody has to be accountable. So you must have consequence management inside your organisation. And I think all companies should go on a journey for sustainability reporting. I know that yesterday someone said the best report in the world is not going to fix some of the sustainability issues inside an organisation, and I couldn't agree more, and the GRI could not agree more. But it is a very, very powerful document. It's an outcomes document, and therefore should be looked at as an outcomes document in the same way the annual report is. But it holds an incredible mirror to the organisation. If your sustainability report actually has to go before your board for sign-off, then nothing can be hidden. And so it's a very, very powerful tool for the board, and it keeps companies honest. But if you, year after year, see an organisation do a triple bottom line report and it's all, nice sayings, but there's never ever a target, and there's never ever an evaluation of, well, we actually set this target last year, we didn't hit it, or we outperformed. And I just want to tell you that I can't imagine how happy HSBC were when they set a 3-year target to be carbon neutral and did it in 1. And the innovation that will release inside that organisation is very, very powerful. So those public commitments are very, very important. There are 3 things that are tactical and mechanistic inside your organisation, but I don't think you can avoid them. You must have line management responsibility. I've actually seen jobs advertised for CSR managers in organisations where the CSR manager would be responsible for the company improving its Dow Jones sustainability rating. Well, the CSR manager can't deliver that. They couldn't possibly deliver it. How can they? They are one person. The organisation has to deliver that. So that needs to be interpreted right down to the person who's managing customer complaints, the person who's managing customer retention rates, the person who is managing diversity within the organisation, the person who is responsible for delivering a new product. So all of those things are very, very important, and it must be line management responsibility. Now, I actually think the CSR advocate inside, and you heard me say this morning, the CSR advocate inside your company, the champion has to be your CEO. He is accountable. At the end of the day, he is the one who is responsible for the tone and the culture and the deliverables within your organisation. And I firmly believe, and I've been in corporate Australia for more than 20 years, I firmly believe an organisation gets the culture it deserves. And we all know that if you tolerate things inside your culture that are not in the best interest, you know that you're going to have to face it sooner or later, and it is not good for you. It's not good for your customers. And so these are the really, really hard things. Another hard thing, internal audit must have overview of policy implementation. No good having a code of conduct but an organisation saying, to the question, well, how many people did you actually dismiss because they didn't comply with your code of conduct this year? And they say, oh, we don't actually track that. Or saying, and what business practices have you actually changed because of your code of, because of your conduct? Oh, we don't actually measure our strategy against that. So your internal audit does play a very, very important part in making sure that's just ticking over inside the organisation. And internal audit actually do get quite interested for it. It's very, very nice for them not to be dealing with financials. Find the person in internal audit who's really switched on to this, and they can move the rest of internal audit for you. So it can be great. It also, again, starts to release innovation inside the organisation. You must reward outcomes. And this is, again, those rewards actually are on the line manager who is responsible for business outcomes. How am I going for time, John? Yep, okay. Just very quickly, these are some of the things that you can use inside your organisation. The balance scorecard, your EOS and pulse checks by Hewitt's. Very interestingly, I know that there are some sustainability industry leaders inside in Australia, and I'm talking about, you know, the top 10, where they actually have falling employee engagement. And I always think that that is a very interesting indicator of where the employees are actually starting to see that behaviour does not fit the rhetoric. And your employees will be engaged if you empower them and you actually give them real work to do and you allow them to innovate inside your organisation. 360-degree performance review is very, very important. And I just go back to what Eva said about cultural inventories. Do you have a constructive culture, or do you have a passive-aggressive or defensive-aggressive culture? And constructive cultures release innovation inside your organisation. So organisational leadership is actually about the culture plus leadership, and that will give you organisational performance. It is not one or the other. So I just go back to those three things: compelling vision, broad-scale commitment, and excellence in execution. I do want to just say, because I know plenty of people have asked me, is I did put in a submission to the Joint Parliamentary Inquiry on whether or not we should have corporations law review. I said no legislation. I don't think you can legislate on this. We have plenty of legislation already. I said if for companies who have management discussion and analysis documents with the release of their annual reports and their annual results, if they're licensed on something, they should disclose. So there's already legislation on those things. People are licensed on them, then ask them to disclose. And I thought that the ASX corporate governance principles need to come into this century. And when those top 200 or 300 companies actually do start thinking and behaving on sustainability, then their supply chains will as well. So we will capture all of Australian business. And if we don't do it now, then shareholder activism will help the ASX get there. But they'll do it one company at a time, which is exactly what Ray Anderson said yesterday. And first of all, we need leadership. And my friends, that must start with you. And those are very wise words of Kofi Annan. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'll just stay here.